Have you experienced the awesome power of the Panasonic Real 3DO system? Obviously.
Presenting 3DO, the most advanced home gaming system in the universe. It's time to put away your toys.
3DO from Panasonic, Gold Star, and Creative Labs. A new low price and free games.
Mind-blowing graphics of Panasonic Real 3DO.
3DO.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the 3DO Experience, the retrospective podcast talking about the 3DO interactive multiplayer system and the company behind it, the 3DO company. My name is Bill, and my co-host is Thrak. How you doing, Thrak?
Oh, I'm doing just fine. How are you doing?
Doing pretty good. Got back from a convention. Tried to find 3DO games, but every vendor I went to was like either didn't know what they were or just didn't have any. So
Yeah, too much weeb shit there.
yeah, it was
Not enough man stuff like the 3DO. That's a man's console right there.
Yep, good old VCR. Yeah, it was a very anime heavy convention, despite being more of a general pop culture styled convention. It was a good time though. Got a lot of art.
That's good. I get the sense that like a lot of those cons are just becoming more and more anime based because anime is just becoming just part of normal like Western culture. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it almost feels like it's not this like Japanese import thing that it was for such a long time. It's just now kind of ingrained in everything.
Yeah, it's like one
know?
of the fastest growing mediums in America right now.
Yeah. They got 2 bombs dropped on them, but they won the real war. They won the culture war.
Yeah, that is true. But anyway, so speaking of something that was not Japanese in the slightest, how about
Oppenheimer? that just dated the episode.
Yeah, that's true. Well, to be fair, 3DO actually does air around the time it comes out, so it won't be too off. But
Yeah, that's true.
yeah, you know, it's funny that movie came out, but no one wants to talk about it because Barbie.
Yeah, I haven't seen either. I don't know if I ever will. It's just funny seeing all these. I guess we'll go on a tangent. Seeing all these like conservative like shitheads try to pretend that they're enraged about the Barbie movie, and it's really funny. Like I think it was like Shapiro has like a 43-minute thing.
I saw that.
And yeah, it's like it says like he destroys Barbie for 43 minutes, and I'm like, there's no way he'd last 43 minutes in Margot Robbie. But I've seen like clips of it, and it's so funny because he doesn't care. He doesn't care. These people do not give a shit at all. They're just doing it because it gets them a lot of money to do it.
Yeah.
So
no, I saw the whole thing, and I was just like, yeah, he's doing what he's doing. I just kind of ignored it and moved on.
Yeah. Like maybe one day I'll watch the Barbie movie out of curiosity, but you know, it's not that big a deal.
No.
I think our culture is just like, oh, it's funny that there's a movie about Barbie. Like just the idea of it is pretty funny. And then, you know, I've seen some legitimate like opinions on the movie that I think are fascinating, but you know, outside of that, is it that big of a deal? No, it's really not.
No.
So
I think a lot of it too is that these guys just know exactly what's going to trigger people, and they're just going to say it to get the attention, which that's kind of just modern culture at this point.
Yeah, like everybody complains about everybody else being so sensitive, and yet they themselves are incredibly sensitive about every little inconsequential thing.
Yeah,
you know,
pretty much.
It's really annoying to me, you know.
Yeah. But you know,
anyway,
you know a console that wasn't sensitive and really did not care at all about what it was doing? the Panasonic 3DO, because it had no standards at all.
Yeah, that's a whole other problem, I think.
For a console that was supposed to be a video game standard, it had none.
Yeah, basically there was no like draconian Nintendo policy or Sega policy on this thing. I'm still not sure if that's a good or a bad thing.
Yeah, I'll give Trip Hawkins a lot of credit. He had a really solid idea. I just don't think it was very well executed in any way.
Yeah, well, we should get him on the show and see what he thinks about it.
I would love to talk to Trip Hawkins just about EA and like 3DO and just like his mindset. Also about portal runner reception thing, but we'll be getting to that much later down the line because that's a story in itself.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so 3DO the 3DO's launch is very interesting in a lot of ways because I was reading a little bit into it, and the 3DO was actually supposed to have like a good handful of launch titles at the time of its launch.
Was that like 4?
Yeah, so during like the 93 like press releases, they were doing like this big multimedia wave kind of thing at Computer World, and they showed off Return Fire, Road Rash, FIFA International Soccer, and Jurassic Park Interactive, and those were supposed to be the launch games for the system.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, none of those studios were done with their games yet, so they all got pushed back to mid 1994, behind the console's initial launch. And the only game that was left was this little obscure racing game called Crash and Burn, created by a little-known studio known as Crystal Dynamics.
Was this their first game?
So I was looking at Crystal Dynamics' gamography, and from what it looks like, Crash and Burn was the first game they fully created.
I wonder if there is anybody at Crystal Dynamics who still works there that worked on Crash and Burn.
So it's funny going into that. So I guess for a little background history, Crash and Burn was released in 1993 in North America. It actually got a Japanese release too in 94.
Yes.
It is a vehicular combat / futuristic racing game that predates Wipeout by a couple of years, but it obviously F-Zero came before it.
Yeah.
And it was directed by David Burke and produced by Mark Wallace. Interestingly enough, the game was designed by Mark Cerny.
Yes, the famous Mark Cerny,
who apparently quickly left the company after to join Universal. And it was composed by Burke. I'm going to butcher this last name, Treschman.
Yeah, sure.
It's a last name. He is a film composer, but he actually did a bunch of Crystal Dynamics games, including 102 Dalmatians, Puppies to the Rescue.
I mean, that's the best Crystal Dynamics game, let's be honest. It's not Tomb Raider. It's not Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver 2. It's 102 Dalmatians.
Puppies to the Rescue. I actually played the shit out of that game, by the way, so that's why I bring it up.
It's all good, man.
Good platformer. Yeah, and the game was programmed by Bill Mitchell. I don't think it's that Billy Mitchell. I assume it's not, but
what, the Donkey Kong guy?
Yeah, I don't think it's the same guy.
No.
But
As far as I know, Billy Mitchell doesn't have like a background in like video game design.
No.
He was just kind of a con man.
I saw Bill Mitchell and I was like, that can't be the same guy. And I was like, no, it's not.
That would be hilarious. But let's see, what did Billy Mitchell do? Oh, he was he owned a bunch of restaurants. That's his thing.
Yeah, and he was supposedly good at Donkey Kong at one point.
Yeah, and it was Pac-Man. I think he was was he actually good at Pac-Man? I think it was Donkey Kong, the one that he was.
He cheated at Donkey Kong. He did actually get to the kill screen in Pac-Man, though. That was like his big claim to fame.
Yeah, but it's one of those things where it's like so many people have gotten to that in Pac-Man. It's not as great of an achievement as it used to be.
He was the first one
as somebody who's never gotten there.
Yeah, he was like the first one to do it because he was like the one that basically discovered it.
Yeah. So we can give him that, but
yeah.
Anyways,
Billy Mitchell has nothing to do with Crash and Burn, though.
Well, his legacy, Crash and Burn, that's for sure.
That's true. And ironically, I love just some irony here, like the fact that the game that 3DO, like Panasonic and 3DO, like decided to put all of their faith in for their console's launch was a game called Crash and Burn.
Well, yeah, that is kind of funny in its irony, but as you said, it was just kind of the de facto game to come out because of the issues developers were having with the hardware to get their games ready to go. So, is this because was Crash and Burn always planned to be the pack-in?
I don't know. It's very unclear on that. Like it kind of mentions that it was literally the only thing available at launch, basically.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, there are two versions of it. There's the jewel case only edition, which is the one I have, and it's the easiest one to find.
That's the one I have 3 copies of, and none of them work.
Yeah, it has a completely different artwork than when you look up, say, the long box version of it, which I think was released later, and that is very expensive. Whereas the jewel case version is very, very easy to come by. And as far as I know, it was packed in with the 3DO for its whole life, unless I'm mistaken on that. But I know it was the pack in for at least the FC1 model.
It was definitely for the FC1. I don't know because Panasonic, I think, partially helped fund it.
That makes sense.
They also failed to have enough consoles out at time for launch, which didn't help things either.
No.
And one last little tidbit about the kind of launch stuff. Trip Hawkins in an interview actually had mentioned years down later that like he actually attributes one of the 3DO's many failures was literally the fact that it had like nothing to play at launch except for Crash and Burn.
Yeah, like it almost with that and with like a short supply of consoles, it almost feels like it would have been easier to just delay the release of the console to like mid 1994 when you have all 5 games ready to go and more systems that you could sell. And maybe even if you wait a little bit, you don't have to sell it at $700, which was another issue. But I've heard that at the time, some retailers weren't even selling it for $700. They were marking it down before they even put it out. They marked it to like $500 even. Because some retailers are like, we're not going to sell these at that price. That is ridiculous.
Yeah. Because and even then, like, imagine if they had waited a few more years and actually saw like what like the PlayStation and like Saturn were going to be, and they probably could have maybe like made some modifications to their hardware and actually made it a bit more on par with what was going on.
Yeah. Like if they had come in closer to the launch of those two systems, they could have probably had more third-party support as well. Because a lot of the third-party support that the 3DO has is like Sega CD kind of games, and not to discount the Sega CD, but a lot of the games from that came over weren't the most well-received things at the time.
No.
You know, it was almost just they threw them on there because the 3DO could do it. You know, like, oh, the 3DO can have higher quality FMVs for Night Trap and Sewer Shark. So let's just put it on there because it'll be a better looking running version of the game compared to the Sega CD, which is true.
Very true. Interestingly enough, too, like when you actually look at who were like the biggest supporters of 3DO during its lifespan, the 3 companies that come up the most are Electronic Arts, obviously because of the Trip Hawkins connection.
Is that intentional?
I assume they had, because he hadn't left Electronic Arts initially until I think like a year into the 3DO's lifespan.
Okay.
Because he eventually left because he couldn't manage both at the same time. He was kind of like ousted from EA, I think.
Yeah. But he also probably had connections as well with the people who were there. You know, probably like elbowing them, being like, "Hey, you should, you know, put some more of your games on my console, buddy."
Yeah.
You know?
3DO itself was also a huge contributor to the 3DO's overall library, and then the third biggest was Crystal Dynamics. Believe it or not,
you could almost say Crystal Dynamics is the Insomniac games of the 3DO.
You could,
in a
lot of ways. And funny that you mentioned Insomniac Games because they actually also had a game for the 3DO in development at one point.
Oh yeah, they did. I forget what that one was though.
Disruptor.
Okay. Did that game ever come out?
Yep, they switched it to PlayStation when they saw how much more powerful the PlayStation was.
Yeah.
So
it makes sense.
It released on PlayStation. It's like a Doom clone. It's not bad.
Yeah. There's probably a million of those back then.
Yeah, there really was.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
or now we call them boomer shooters.
Boomer shooters.
Yeah. I kind of like that title.
I like it because it's funny, not so much the connotation that only boomers enjoy these games. But
I honestly, I think the term boomer shooter just implies that it's like it's an old style first person shooter. That it's like a modern take on like a Doom or a Quake kind of thing, like that Warhammer bolt gun game. Like that is very much like going for the boomer shooter aesthetic.
Or that that game that was made by like the Duke Nukem team, like I can't remember it. But
Duke Nukem 3D?
No, there was a there was another game that was made by it ran in the same exact engine. It came out like a couple of years ago. I can't remember the name of it to save for the life of me though.
Yeah, I'm probably familiar with it. I just can't remember.
Yeah, but it's like that old school style shooter. Like,
yeah.
Honestly, I find those more fun than modern first person shooters, but that's just a personal thing.
Depends on the game for me.
Yeah. But yeah, so Crash and Burn.
Oh fuck.
So believe it or not, this was actually the game that kind of made me want a 3DO back when I first discovered it.
Really?
Well, because when I was getting into old school games and stuff, like I was kind of looking at like images of like what gameplay was, and the easiest game that you could find footage of back in the day of for 3DO stuff was Crash and Burn, because I think there's just so much footage of it out there.
Yeah,
And
and it's definitely a game that there's a lot of copies floating around. You know?
That is true. And I saw like the graphics and I thought they looked really sharp at the time, especially because I was really getting into that old school aesthetic. And it kind of just was what like intrigued me to get a 3DO. Ironically, it's one of the game I've had the hardest time getting because my copies keep either dying on me or they just don't work at all.
That is very strange. Maybe the universe is trying to tell you something.
Yeah, I have played a good amount of it though, because my original copy worked for a while. It eventually crapped out on me, but
yeah. I've played a fair amount of this game as well.
Yeah, and it is the most 90s game I think I've played in a long time. Like the full motion video, like actors that portray the different races in the game are so extra, it's not even funny.
Yeah, like it has that cheesy FMV thing that the 90s were going for. Like there is so much corny FMV like acting from that time. I almost have to think it's intentional.
Yeah.
For a long time, I thought it was these people were just thinking like, oh, this is what like, you know, what we should do acting wise for this kind of like I thought these people were like legitimately trying to be serious actors. But the older I've gotten, the more I'm just like, oh no, they're being told to like ham it up. They're being told to be silly because they're thinking, oh, we're doing like a game, so it's not like that big of a deal. It's not that serious, so we can just kind of be silly with it. That would be my guess.
It reminds me a lot of like Power Rangers acting, where it's just so over the top to the point where that's kind of just the point at this point.
Yeah, but like at least with Power Rangers, they can back it up with having a lot of like really fun action, you know.
Yeah,
and they know exactly what they're doing. But in my opinion, Crash and Burn doesn't even come close to that.
No, you don't see a lot of the full motion video actors because the majority of the gameplay is either in-game graphics or it's like pre-rendered CG cutscenes.
Yeah. The only times the most you see of the FMV stuff is when you're selecting your racer, and then in tournament mode, occasionally the quote unquote champion of that circuit will come on to say some whatever crap at you. I don't know. I wasn't really paying that much attention.
There's a lot of shit talking in this game, and it's really amusing, but at the same time, it gets really old real quick.
Yeah. It feels like it was just thrown in there because they're like, oh, we have this console that can do it, so let's just go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
Because outside of that, graphically, I'm assuming for the time it's kind of impressive.
So it's kind of like Mario. So it predates Mario 64, but it actually uses a very similar graphical style where the actual tracks are full 3D, but the car itself is a pre-rendered object.
Though if I'm correct, your car is pre-rendered, but everybody else's car is 3D.
They're either 3D or they're just kind of like really low res pre-renders. They may be 3D because they definitely don't look the same. Like, because your car in game looks very shiny. Like,
oh yeah,
to the point where when it turns, it almost snaps into place. Like, it doesn't move naturally compared to like the actual like track in a lot of ways. And nowadays looks not very good, but back in the day probably looked amazing.
Yeah, one thing that impressed me with the game was the draw distance.
It is solid.
The draw distance is surprisingly really good, and that even though I'm playing it through just your standard AV cables, which outputs I think just like 240p, I think
480, I believe.
Well, I think you need the S video to get the 480. At least that's the little bit I read. In fact, I even ordered an S video cable to see if I can get a better image quality out of it. But yeah, I was impressed by like the draw distance, how you can clearly see like the other racers, even if they're just little pixels. You can still see them pretty well. And
it also runs at a really smooth, I want to say 30 because
it's not 30. That is not 30 frames per second, my dude. Like I'm not the most accurate when it comes to frame rates. Like Like some people are really good at determining like if something's 30 or if something's like 60 or whatever. Like I have a little bit of an eye for it, but not as much as some other people do.
See, I
Like,
can't tell at all. So like,
yeah,
if it looks smooth to me, I just assume it's 30.
yeah. Like there are games that have surprised me, like Kirby and the Forgotten Land on Switch is only 30, but that's like the smoothest 30 frames game I've ever played in my life. It's really good.
Well,
This
sometimes
game,
I'll think of like maybe like something like F-Zero X, which I know did run at 60, but it
yeah,
also had
or
like
GX on the GameCube.
so GX definitely ran at 60. I know X
yeah.
did, but X also had like the most basic graphics ever to
Yeah,
compensate
yeah.
for it.
Like I think GX is more impressive because it has like really good looking polygonal models for the time, and is really fast paced. And there's a lot of performance coming out of that game, and for it to stay 60 most of the time, like I think like 98% of the time, is really good. Yeah, this ain't running at 30. This is like almost like N64 levels of frame rates, man, where it's like maybe 20, somewhere in the 20s, I think. But I will say the frame rate is locked for the most part. Like there are times where it messes with me, but not as much as I was expecting. You know
So
what I mean?
I never had a moment where I felt like the frame rate kind of screwed me up. I always felt like it was running like
No.
super like consistent for a 1993 game or 90,
Yeah,
93
but
game.
yeah, because I think some of the younger folk don't realize that a lot of games from the Super Nintendo Genesis era ran at 60 frames. You know, like
Yeah.
because but back then frames wasn't really that big of a deal. Like nobody really thought about that until you got to like the 3D era. Really.
Yeah, where like the majority of N64 games barely ran at like 14 at times.
Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, the visuals look pretty okay. It does have it's trying art wise to go for something that's its own.
There are some fun like level kind of tropes, like the first level I think of has like water sections on the tracks where the terrain actually gets like slipperier.
I think it's ice.
Yeah, either ice or water. It had like a flowing texture, but that might have just been like that might have been going for more of a reflection thing, and it just came off like that.
Yeah, I think there's water, ice, sand, and oil. Like if I remember correctly, almost every track has one portion of the track where it is one of those like 4 hazards. Sometimes there's even more than one. Or you have those weird like F-Zero style like racetracks where it's just like a street just suspended in like space or
Yeah,
like
there's
really
one that,
high
like,
up or whatever, and they just have like the arrows telling you where to go, and then there's like those blue sort of wavy parts on the track that are meant to, I think, simulate slippery water or ice.
Yeah, it's
like
supposed
physics,
to kind of be like a clear, like translucent kind of texture.
Yeah.
Almost Rainbow Roadish in a way.
To me that was very like F-Zero. Like I wouldn't be surprised if Crystal Dynamics was looking towards F-Zero a little bit for inspiration for this more kind of futuristic game. Though I think we can safely say this is nowhere near the quality of F-Zero. Nowhere near.
So I'd probably play this over the original F-Zero, but like F-Zero X and GX, no, it's not even close.
See, I still really like the first F-Zero. It's not perfect. It's definitely rough around the edges, but I just think it controls much better than this. You know, like the control in this game is fine, I think, for what it's trying to be, but one thing that really upset me about this game is that there's no brake button.
No, there isn't.
Like it's you hold A to accelerate, and as soon as you let it go, your car just like grinds to a halt basically. And so it feels very like hairpin trigger type driving, and
the steering is very snappy as well. Like it feels kind of like it's on almost like you're on like a ball pivot when you turn.
A little bit. And it's like the only way you can get really good at this game is to like, you know, press A at like the right time to like stop, because you can kind of drift, but you just have to be kind of lucky with it. It feels like there's a little bit of luck involved with making sure you turn really, really well, because I tried to beat the tournament story mode and I couldn't do it. And I got pretty far, because if I remember correctly, in tournament mode, there are 6 circuits with 5 tracks each, and you have to get at least third to qualify to move on to the next track, and there's
Yeah.
6 racers, so it makes sense. Even though logically, like, I find it funny that you have to place at least third to qualify, but yet there's always 6 racers and they're always the same, so it
Yeah.
doesn't really matter.
There's also a lot of like kind of bottish computers that just exist, but they're not
Oh,
like scored.
drones.
Yeah.
Drones is what they go. I hate the drones. I despise the drones because they only exist to annoy you.
Yep.
They don't, like, from what I played, they didn't really affect the computer that much. They only really existed to affect me, and I hated them. And I did get joy when I would kill them, but a lot of the times I would just try to drive around them because I just didn't want to worry about them or waste my ammo on them.
Yeah. And speaking of ammo, this game has one other major mechanic, and that is a combat system,
which kind of sucks and feels very
Yeah.
superfluous. Like, it's not
no
Twisted
Wipeout.
Metal. It's
No
not
Wipeout.
Wipeout. It's none of that. It's not even Road Rash, where, you know, the combat actually has some meaning to it. Here,
Mhm.
it's just they added it because they needed something a little different. And in my experience with it, I think it maybe helped me once when it comes to, like, because I think it's if you shoot a racer enough, you know, you can blow up their car and then they'll just be like knocked out of the race.
Mhm.
But in my experience, the computer did that all the time, and I could never do that once. No matter how much I tried to upgrade my weapons, I was just never strong enough for them. But yet, if a particular racer got behind me and started like spamming like a weapon at me, and, you know, if I didn't have really good armor, they could just kill me like really quickly. And
Yep.
it was very unfair. Like, I don't think this game has rubber banding when
No.
it comes to the racing, because there was a couple races where for some reason I was super far ahead. Like, I was like clearing them. Like, I never lapped anybody, but I was so far ahead. And it was weird. Like, this, to me, there's so much inconsistent difficulty in this game, particularly in the tournament mode, because there were some races where, yeah, I would win first easy. Like, I would just clear them, no problem. And then, like, the very next race, I'm like struggling between like second and third, and then I clear it. And then the very next race, it's like, oh, I'm in first again, like, no problem. And it was just kind of all over the place. And then when I got stuck, which was Circuit 4, Track 3, I believe, which was one of those like translucent F-Zero kind of stages, I went from like being able to be first or most of the time, or even like second some of the time. Like, I think my points were like 150 something, and like number 2 was like 80 something. All of a sudden, I was like hovering in 5th, and I don't know what happened. Like, I kept restarting the game because it does have continues where you can kind of cheese them by just quitting the game out and just reloading your save file, because it saves every time you finish a race automatically for you. But I would go into the shop and like look through everything and be like, is there a particular weapon I need? Is there a particular special item I need? Like, I know there's the whole like black market thing, because in Crash and Burn, in between each race, you can go to a shop, and the money that you earn from the race for, like, you know, finishing really high or taking out some drones, you can use that to upgrade your car. You know, makes sense, right? But every once in a while you would get these like black market deals, but it was like very random. Like, it only happened to be once where it's just like this weird Terminator looking dude would just be like, hey, I got this really cool thing for you. Are you interested? And you'd say, well, yeah, of course I'll take it. Why wouldn't I, right? And the only one I ever got was the one where the armor heals your car like automatically as you go, which I actually really liked, because it helped circumvent some of the issue I was having with certain racers getting behind me and just spamming their guns and I would die.
Yep.
You know, this helped a little bit. But I looked through the whole store to see if there was anything that would actually give me a speed boost. There was the nitrous, but you don't get a lot of nitrous, like, at all. And it doesn't even make you that much faster.
No, it doesn't.
It really doesn't. Like you normally, like the little speedometer at the top, like normally you're at like maybe 300, 315. I would hit the nitrous and I would be maybe going 345. And it's like, well, what the hell was the point of that, you know? So you can tell the combat and the upgrades and everything. It seemed very not well thought out.
Yeah, you can tell in a lot of ways this was very much the studio's first game, and it was also kind of the first of its kind in this weird, like, futuristic racer / combat game, which would ironically later become a very successful genre. Just this game was not was not the best start.
But it wasn't the first combat racer, because, not to get too far ahead of us, but I got Road Rash for 3DO, and I've been playing that. And Road Rash is essentially the same game, but better in like every sense. Like, it's a combat racer where you have like a story mode where you pick a racer, and then you have to place third to qualify in the races, and then the money you get, you go to the shop to upgrade your bike. But in Road Rash, it's simple. You just get a better bike. There's no like stats you have to tweak or anything like that. You just get it. But that game is so much more well designed.
Yes.
It's much more fun, and the combat actually has meaning. And like Road Rash, because I'm sure we'll do a Road Rash episode in the future, but like, it's so well done, like, overall, that it's like, why would I play Crash and Burn? I have Road Rash.
Yeah, so the big difference was Road Rash was created by a well-established studio, and Crash and Burn was created by a studio that would later become very well-established, but had a pretty rough start.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I think if Crystal Dynamics, if they had just, instead of trying to make some kind of like forward-thinking combat futuristic racing shooter thing, if they had just made like a standard racing game, it probably would have been just fine. Like, yeah, it would have been bland, but like, it would be fine. Because I will admit, there were points playing this game where I had some fun with it, and I didn't think it was like overall, I think it's just mediocre.
Yeah,
like, it's very like 5 out of 10 maybe.
It's heavily aged. Like, I think at the time, like for 93, I think it would, if we took a time machine back to 93, I think this would still be a very well done game. Unfortunately, unfortunately, there's just so many better games out now.
Well, and also think about, like, in 1993, the racing games that you had, like on Super Nintendo, there was F-Zero, there was the original Mario Kart. Like, I'm not a big fan of the original Mario Kart, but you gotta recognize that. Like, on the Genesis, there was, the Road Rash games. There was a game I grew up playing on the Genesis called Mario Andretti Racing, which actually isn't too bad. Yeah. Was Daytona in the arcades at this point?
Daytona USA, I believe, was in the arcades.
Okay. And maybe Virtual Racing?
Virtual Racing definitely was. I actually think the Genesis version was out by this point.
Okay. So, like, you had other options for racing games at the time, ones that I think have held up a lot more than this,
Yeah.
I mean, is it fair to critique an old game because it didn't age well as another game? Like, I don't know, because it's hard to tell what's going to age well and what's not, especially at that time. But even if you're comparing it to what's around it in 93, like, to me, it's just like, it stands out for being like attempting to be a showcase for this console, but at the same time, it doesn't have a lot of substance. Like, it doesn't have a multiplayer mode.
No, it doesn't.
I know,
that's baffling considering it's the 3DO interactive multiplayer system.
Yeah, and I know the original F-Zero didn't have multiplayer either, which is an issue with that as well. But at least F-Zero gets away with it by having like better track design, better racing overall, and just being more engaging of an experience. Whereas Crash and Burn, I tried, man. I put like 8-9 hours into this game, and at points I was like, it's not bad, but then there are other points where I'm just like, this is like really kind of frustrating, And
yeah, like, ironically, looking at the reception for this game, it got pretty decent reviews. Like, obviously some companies were pretty meh on it, like Famitsu in particular gave it a 19 out of 40.
Yeah, which is, I mean, Famitsu have their own issues when it comes to rating stuff, but like, for them to give something like a 19 is not high praise. But like, not to get off the topic, but I think Famitsu, like, these days, like, almost every game's like a 38 out of 40. That's a whole nother issue.
Oh, another thing that I think is hilarious too is for a game called Crash and Burn, you can't actually crash.
Yeah, that's true.
Like
Though you can burn.
Oh yeah, you burn. They got the burn part right. There's no way to crash though, which I think is hilarious.
One thing I find funny is whenever you like, say you get blown up during a race and you die, like, and it gives you the continue screen. It on the top it says "Greetings from Heaven," and the first time I saw that, I got quite a kick out of it because I thought that was really funny.
It's just funny because that was also during like the Final Fantasy era where they had to change like Prey into Pearl or whatever, some weird shit like that.
Well, again, 3DO, like, no standard at all.
They didn't
so.
care. They were like,
Yeah, you
whatever.
can say heaven. Who cares, right? Real quick, I'll mention the soundtrack, and that
It's catchy.
I didn't really
No.
care for it. I mean, I like that 90s MIDI kind of thing. It's cute, but here it's just there's not enough variety. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's nothing I would hunt out, but like I didn't like.
No.
I was never at a point where I muted the screen because I hated it.
No, but like as I was playing it, to me, it seemed like it was just the same song every track.
Yeah,
I could be wrong on that.
It had that very cyberpunk-esque feel to it, where it was like trying very hard to be this post-apocalyptic thing.
Yeah, and it's like, and when you're in the menus, it's just completely silent, which I get it. A lot of games were that way at the time. Like menu music was still not really a thing yet, but
yeah,
just like if there's anything in like a video game that freaks me out, it is like no sound at all.
Yeah,
like it's kind of like scary to me.
Early
when
games
it's just
are
dead
full of
quiet. Yeah, it always like kind of freaks me out. So this game's kind of no exception to that.
What's interesting too is this game actually was developed simultaneously with another title known as Total Eclipse, which I'm sure we'll be talking about in the future.
Is that game better? God, I hope it's better.
It's been a while since I played it. I remember liking it.
Okay, I don't have that one yet.
It's worth picking up. It also had a sequel on the Saturn.
Okay.
Called Solar Eclipse.
Yeah, we'll do a live at the time of recording. eBay lookup of Total Eclipse. Oh, not bad at all. That is a long box for like $20. That's pretty solid. So I might have to grab that. But one thing I will give this game credit for. There was one thing about Crash and Burn that I genuinely liked.
Mm-hmm.
So at the start of each lap, they have like the little pit stop onto the side, right?
Yes.
And so, if you're damaged or you want to refill your weapons, you go to the pit stop to fill up, right? But when you go into the pit stop, it's still like in real time with the race. So like you can go in and fill up and everything, but you'll see in the corner the little map where the cars are still driving. So say you are in a decent spot in the race, but you kind of need to like repair your car, otherwise it's going to blow up. You have to try to time it to where you go in and then maybe fill it just enough to where you can like rush out and still like keep your spot, and even
like
then it doesn't
racing in a way.
Yeah, there's a little like risk reward kind of system in there. And I thought that was like actually like really well done.
Yeah, it's honestly, I like it more than what F-Zero does, because F-Zero just has kind of like the little side portions of the screen where you kind of just run through and it will heal you.
Yeah, because I think it's trying to keep the race like going in F-Zero, like the pace and everything. But it's like if you mess that up, then it doesn't really help, and you have to it's not in the same place in every race.
Yeah.
So you have to like essentially do a lap to be like, okay, that's where it is. That's the spot I can go like fill up at. Whereas in Crash and Burn, it's always at the start finish every time.
It also adds an element of strategy where you kind of have to, like you were saying earlier, you really have to think about when you're going to go to pits, like to avoid screwing your race. Yeah,
and I liked that. I thought that was like a neat little thing that was in there, and I'm sure other racing games have done it before. But I always like when racing games have that element of like the pit stop, where you have to sort of like go, okay, I need to like pit here so I can like get up with gas or whatever. Because with as I had mentioned, I think it was Mario Andretti Racing on the Sega Genesis, it has the same sort of like pit stop thing, because it'll have like your gas and tire meter, and if it's getting low, you have to go in and pit to try to keep up with everybody. So
that's like based off IndyCar, so I assume it was trying to play into the IndyCar style.
Yeah, it has like IndyCar racing, it has stock car racing, and it also had another type of car that I can't remember. It was almost like they look like buggies, but I don't know if they're called buggies, something similar to that. I know you're a racing guy, so you probably know this better than me, but
Yeah, I'd have to play it. It's been years since I messed around with that one because I
yeah.
played. I was more into like for Genesis racers. I was thinking like Arden Senna's racing game.
Yeah, that one's really good.
Hmm.
But yeah, like for the time, I could see why Crash and Burn would be a bit of a spectacle, and it's like, oh, look at that. But if you think about it, if you're paying $700
Yeah,
in October of 1993, right? Like all the Halloween decorations are up, and you're, maybe you're a divorced dad trying to prove to your kids that you still care about them, right? So you buy them a $700 console to be like, I still care about you, bucko. I spent $700 on your ass. And then you take it over, and then you're like, all right, let's play the game that comes with it, Crash and Burn, right? You're playing it, well, you're kind of going back and forth, just no multiplayer. And you're trying to have some fun with it, but it's also kind of frustrating. And you're trying, but it's not the easiest thing. And then maybe your kid's like, "Oh, that was okay, Dad. What other games does the system have?" And then the dad has to go, "Wait a minute, there is nothing else."
yep.
And into November, into December, nothing. It's not till literally January 1st of 1994 they get two other games, one of which is worse than Crash and Burn.
Yep, that's a theme
Yeah.
with 3DO.
Yeah. So it's like, can I really get mad at this game for not being great? Like, no. But I did get frustrated. I think I rage quit at least once or twice because
I remember the difficulty spike being pretty absurd at times.
Yeah, it didn't make any sense to me, and it just felt like poor game design or poor game programming or something. And that's the thing. I wanted to finish it. I wanted to do the whole tournament, see the whole end, be like the champion or the world or whatever. Like, I wanted to do it, but I couldn't do it. I had to DNF it, and it upsets me because I still haven't officially beaten a 3DO game yet. But we'll get there, audience. I have to beat one of these. I have to see one of these to the end. Mm-hmm. So
we got plenty to go through. So we're going to get there progressively over the course of this. Also, interesting thing I was reading about. So we had mentioned like how many people from Crystal Dynamics are probably still there and who's gone at this point.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, like because of so the fifth generation of gaming ended up being a lot slower of a start than a lot of like these developers thought.
Yeah.
And Crystal Dynamics in particular overexpanded and like grew way too quickly to the point where they had to lay off the majority of their workforce before like restructuring themselves. And they went through like 3 CEOs over the course of their early days. Like they were kind of all over the place.
Yeah. Yeah, because looking at their sort of gameography, in the early days of like the 3DO stuff, it's it's like they're trying everything. There's no real like set sort of identity that they have. I mean, the closest is maybe Gex, but
Gex is the first real one where you kind of think, okay, this is what Crystal Dynamics style is.
Kind of, because then like the sequel didn't come out till like 3 years later, which back in those days probably seemed a lot longer than it is now.
They also published a lot more.
Yeah. They also published a bit too. Because I believe they published the port of Samurai Showdown to 3DO as well.
Yes, they also did not make. So another game that they're famous for is a game called Pandemonium. They didn't actually make the first one. That was actually made by Toys for Bob.
Yes. I think I knew about that.
They did make the second one though, which isn't as good as the first one. Yeah,
I think Midway published that one, but really it feels like until like Legacy of Kain, the whole like when I assume Eidos acquired Crystal Dynamics is when they kind of started to get a bit more of an identity.
Ironically, that was also a series they stole from another developer.
Oh, really?
Because the first Legacy of Kain was developed by Silicon Knights.
Really? As far as I know, everyone's always given them Crystal Dynamics the credit for making it.
So, to be fair, the only game Silicon Knights made was Blood Omen, Legacy of Kain. The game that really kicked off like the famous era of Legacy of Kain was Soul Reaver, which was the one that featured like Amy Hennig's work as the director.
Yeah.
And like the whole like basically all the lore and like Raziel and basically everything people love about Legacy of Kain was with Soul Reaver, which was Crystal Dynamics' first game in the series.
Yeah. So not only did they take it, they made it better.
Yeah, because like Blood Omen is like a Zelda style top down game it's fine. It has some interesting lore to it, but it's like Soul Reaver is just like a technical marvel. And it honestly, I wish it was on 3DO so we'd have a reason to talk about it for this podcast more. But
yeah, I get what you mean. Like Legacy of Kain's pretty cool. So.
Yeah, it's one of those dead series I really wish would come back.
Yeah, though I imagine when we get around to Gex, we'll probably have to talk about the other two Gex games that are on 3DO. So I feel like we have to.
I think we should, because I think also when we talk about Total Eclipse, we should talk about Solar Eclipse.
Yeah,
just because it is technically its sequel.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll branch out when we need to.
Because I mean, we are eventually going to talk too about the 3DO games that come out after 3DO is done, because we're going to talk about some of their very short-lived time as a publisher.
Yeah. Because then Crystal Dynamics picked up Tomb Raider in 2006. Okay.
Yep, after Eidos famously took it away from Core Design.
See, I thought it wasn't until the reboot.
No, it was
the 2013 one.
It was
which is the only Tomb Raider I've beaten.
Oh, really?
I've only played 2 Tomb Raider games. I've played the original one on the Sega Saturn, which isn't very good, and then I played the reboot, which I really liked, and I have the other 2. I just haven't played them yet.
So the first reboot, the Crystal Dynamics' first game, I think it's like Tomb Raider Legend. That is a really good game.
Is that a reboot as well?
It's a loose reboot. Like, it still kind of has elements from the original series, but it kind of starts fresh, so you don't really need to play the original games. It ignores everything from Angel of Darkness, basically.
Gotcha. Yeah, because then they did the 2013 one, which to me it's like if Uncharted was more of a game.
Yeah.
which I'm not trying to throw shade at Uncharted, but like I in my time playing the Uncharted games, I feel like I really enjoyed the Tomb Raider reboot more. I thought it was more fun of an experience because there was more to it as far as like gameplay and exploration and all that. Like, it wasn't as strong story wise as Uncharted, but I think it was a better overall like game.
Ironically, we were talking about Amy Hennig for Legacy of Kain. She was also the primary director of Uncharted.
Yep. And didn't she start a studio recently?
Yeah, because she left Naughty Dog during the production of 4, and the Last of Us guys took over for 4.
Yeah,
because she went to LucasArts right when Disney pulled the plug.
Okay.
Because I think she was working on that Star Wars 2099 game or 2040 whatever number game.
Yeah. Star Wars 1313.
1313. Yeah, the game that looked really promising that Disney killed because they didn't make it.
Yeah. But I feel like that game, the Ubisoft Star Wars game that's coming out, Star Wars that's not Star Wars Eclipse, that's something different. But this new Star Wars game that's coming out, I feel like that's kind of like a spiritual successor to 1313. At least that's the vibe I get from it.
Yeah. You know what's kind of funny about Crash and Burn? Just something I noticed.
What's that?
There's another game called Crash and Burn that's for the PS2.
Yes.
It has the exact same name, but it has no relation at all to the 3DO game.
Yes, because when I mentioned to some people that we were doing this game Crash and Burn, some of them said to me, they're like, "This isn't related to the PS2 one, is it?" And I'm like, "It is not."
No,
we did not play that one, so unfortunately we can't talk about it unless you've played it. I've never played it.
That's one of the rare PS2 racing games I do not actually own, and I kind of need to find a copy of it now.
Oh, you own every PS2 racing game?
I own a lot of them. I own more PS1 racing games because that's kind of my favorite pastime, is just buying the most obscure racers I can find because they're so cheap.
Oh yeah. Racing games don't have the same prestige to them in the resale market.
Nope, because they're kind of considered sports games, even though I don't really consider them sports games.
I don't know. I consider racing games their own genre. They're their
Yeah.
own thing. So, but I imagine like there are probably some racing games that do have some value to them. Like I know there are a couple of GBA racing games that are really expensive.
Mhm.
Like I think there's Sega Rally Championship on there that commands quite a price.
Tokyo Extreme Racer 2 on the Dreamcast is absurdly expensive.
Yeah. Was Outrun on PS2 expensive? The Coast to Coast?
I got it for like $40. I mean, that's a lot for a PS2 game in my opinion, but
That's not a terrible price though.
no, it's not like it's not triple digits. It's no like dot hack part 4 or anything.
Yeah. I feel like when games start to get like when old games are like matching current game prices, that's when I kind of get a little like ugh.
Yeah.
But you know,
You know what's
so
hilarious?
a lot of
too,
these
though?
3DO games I've spent like some of them I paid like $60 for, but whatever.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but I mean, they are so cool, like for as a collector, because they're like whenever you
Oh,
have
yeah.
someone who's like checking out your collection, they're always like, "What are those?" And it's like, "Yeah, I get to talk about 3DO now for like 5 minutes."
Yeah.
Funny
Oh,
fun fact
Oh,
though
Amy Henning was a writer on Battlefield Hardline. Oh boy.
oh
Oh.
lucky her. You remember that game, guys? Anyone? Yeah.
It was sort of like Battlefield trying to have like a what was it, like a CSI?
Cops and robbers, I think, was the big thing.
Yeah, like a neat concept, but it just didn't. Anyway,
So I was gonna say one funny thing about the Crash and Burn Wikipedia page for the 2004 game is they actually had to add in a little thing at the top that says this game bears no relation to the 3DO title of the same name.
thank God. I guess there was enough people complaining about it.
I guess, or someone had to point it out just because.
Yeah, 'cause that is published by Eidos.
Yeah, that's ironic. And Climax made it.
Yeah,
Climax made a lot of games.
Oh, BlackRock, the guys who did Split Second. Yeah, Split Second's great.
I mean, they're a good developer. I mean, that game's probably good.
But
I should try it at some
Though
point.
BlackRock, they don't exist anymore.
Well, I don't even think Climax exists.
No, because Climax is BlackRock. It's just like the same. They just renamed themselves.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because if I remember, at a certain point, Disney Interactive Studios bought them.
Yeah, they probably didn't want to have the name Climax or something. I don't know.
Well, maybe because then they made, if I remember, they made the Pure, the quad like ATV type game, and I've never played that, but I've heard it's not bad. And then Split Second was fun, very repetitive, like almost not in a good way, but I enjoyed my time with Split Second. I actually did end up finishing that one, the story mode on that, and it was a lot of fun. That one was really good. I just think the issue BlackRock had was Disney just didn't promote their games at all.
Didn't they get killed by the Disney shutdown? Because I know that killed a lot of studios.
Yeah, because Disney Interactive basically doesn't exist anymore.
No, they completely killed everything going on except for, and the only studio I think that escaped was Avalanche.
Yeah, basically.
Because
And I don't even know
Warner Brothers picked them up.
Yeah, and then they're kind of doing their own thing right now. But
yeah, they made a really cool Harry Potter game that everyone had a bitch fit over for like a month.
I
mean, I don't like Harry Potter, but I think the game itself looked pretty cool.
I'm sure the game is fine, and I could see why maybe some people would have issues with it due to the controversy surrounding the author.
The way I put it is take it out on the author. Don't take it out on the studio that's trying to survive over here.
It's a very complicated thing.
Yeah, I know.
But it's like I don't give a shit.
I don't really either because I'm not a Harry Potter guy at all.
Yeah, I've never been. It's never my thing. So I'm more of a Lord of the Rings person. But anyways, but yeah, Disney Interactive, as far as I know, they just sort of license their old stuff for people.
Yeah, so. they because Star Wars they gave to EA for a while, and now I guess they're letting Ubisoft try.
Yeah, and then they did the they license out the Aladdin, Lion King, and Jungle Book games for modern platforms, which that warmed my heart because I really enjoy those games.
Ironically, the first thing Avalanche made after they escaped from Disney was they worked on Cars 3, the game. So
I've heard is good.
Cars 2, the game, is the best part about that movie.
Yeah.
And Cars 3 is just that, but in HD and better.
Yeah, I've heard that's like good. I've never played it though.
It's a really fun kart racer.
Okay,
Like
nothing wrong with that.
I mean, you get past the fact that it's based off the Cars universe, which, I mean, not gonna lie, I thought Cars 3 was an awesome film because it's just like all racing references. But
see, I've never seen Cars 3. I've seen Cars 1 a bunch. I saw Cars 2 in the theater when it came out.
that must have been a wonderful experience.
It was. I was dating somebody at the time, and we're just like, "Oh, let's go see this movie." And it was like a dollar theater type thing. And I just remember watching it, thinking this movie is bad, like really bad.
You know what the worst part is? Too,
I've never seen it since, though.
So I marathoned all of them once because for some reason me and my sister Alex really just wanted to watch the Cars films for some reason. And when we got to 2, I remember thinking the whole time, I'm like, if this movie was just the racing parts, like the actual like World Racing Championship, it would actually be pretty cool. But no, there's some spy shit that like takes up half the movie.
Yeah, I don't know what they were thinking with that. Like, why? Like,
they really wanted to make a spy movie, I guess. I don't know.
Like, it almost feels like they wanted it to be a like a spin-off movie for Mater, when it's like you could have just did that as like, you could have just had like, like Mater's like unfortunate journey or whatever.
Well,
like,
it's because those Mater's Tall Tales like mini shorts were really well received.
Yeah, but it's like, why you just make a movie, like just do that instead of it being like Cars 2? Because to me, it wasn't. It didn't feel like a sequel to Cars.
Well, that's why
like,
for Cars 3, they like pushed Mater so far to the back, like he's barely in the movie.
Yeah, he's probably helping out with somebody's cable, I think.
He appears for I see, but he appears in like a couple scenes, and it's mostly just background stuff.
Okay. Maybe one of these days I'll check out that Cars 3, but I know Cars these days for a completely different reference that I don't know if is podcast friendly or not.
Probably not, knowing the internet.
I have a feeling you know what I'm thinking.
Yeah, possibly. But yeah, so we're coming up to the hour mark. I think
we'll talk about it in the Discord.
Yeah. I was thinking, there's a cursed image gallery that might be perfect for that.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, so something for the game's specific episodes, I actually had something I kind of wanted to do for each one, and that was kind of like, I guess I wanted to pose the question, if you were someone that was getting into starting a 3DO collection, which I wish more people would do because it's a very obscure hobby, but
it would drive up the price though.
Yeah, true. I mean, it'll happen eventually anyways, but
well, the prices are already kind of bad, but like, let us get all the good stuff, and then you guys can go buy what's left, okay?
Well, you see, by the time that this podcast gets noticed, we'll already have everything we want. So.
Exactly. So this is like for future people,
Yeah.
When the second video game crash happens, and these games become dirt cheap, then that's when you can drive up the price of the 3DO again. All right.
Yes. But anyways, to pose my question though, I was going to say, if you were going to get into 3DO collecting, would you recommend this game as a game that is a must play or a not so much a must play? And to me, I'd say it's probably not a must play. It's more of a if you find it for cheap kind of game, I'd get it. But other than that, probably not.
Here, let's go with this scale.
Okay.
It's either a must play, an okay, or a stay away.
Okay, that totally makes more sense than what I was thinking here.
Yeah, off top of my noggin. I would give this a stay away. I was kind of harsh on it, even though I say it's mediocre. But in my opinion, if you are building a 3DO collection and you're looking for a racing game, there are better options that we will have future episodes on, I'm sure. Like this, to me, maybe at the time it was cute, but it didn't have enough for me. and the overall driving wasn't the best. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna compare this to like Forza Horizon 5.
No.
Like, no shot, which is probably my favorite racing game ever. But like, we're not doing that. But for 1993, I think it's mediocre. And if I was looking for a racing game at the time, I don't think spending $700 to play this was really a worthy investment.
No.
So, and even if you're trying to build a 3DO collection, like a jewel case copy you can find for, I think I paid like $20 for it. It's not hard to come by. But for me, it's not really worth the time, you know, because you'll probably play it and go like, you'll probably think what I thought, which is like you're playing it and you're like, this isn't too bad. Like, this is kind of neat. And then after a while, you'll just get kind of frustrated and go, actually, maybe I didn't like this game.
Yeah.
Like, at all.
That's kind of the way I kind of gave it like it's an okay, like, it's fine, but it's like really not, it's not something I would use as a system seller for this game at all.
Oh, no.
Which is unfortunately what it was.
But you can clearly tell it wasn't made to be a system seller. It was made to be there for, the launch. So it would get like more notoriety, which it definitely did. But I think it just highlights the issues that the game has.
What's funny is like it wasn't even listed in those 4 games that were being announced at launch.
Yeah.
And it was just like this thing that I guess, because ironically, the other game Crystal Dynamics was making, Total Eclipse, was listed in those games, and that was just something that they must have been working on the side that was done. So they were kind of like, here.
Was Total Eclipse in that list?
Yeah, so it was Road Rash, Total Eclipse, FIFA, and the Jurassic Park.
I thought it was Return Fire. Not Total Eclipse.
No, you might be right there. I might be flubbing here.
No, that's okay. Because if I remember correctly, Crash and Burn, it's...
Nope, you're right. It was Return Fire. I've mixed those two up.
Yeah, it's all good. But I remember Crash and Burn, it has like the previews in it, and it does have a preview for Total Eclipse. And
That's
if I remember,
what I'm thinking, yeah.
And if I remember, Total Eclipse came out in like when we hit January 94, like some games actually start coming out for this thing, and one of those was Total Eclipse. So it did come out pretty soon after the launch. And it's so weird to me that those 4 games, Road Rash, Return Fire, FIFA, and Jurassic Park, were meant to be at the launch, yet like the first one of those didn't come out till May of 94, and it was meant to be there in October of 93.
Yeah.
What?
Ironically, 3 of those 4 games are considered some of the best games on the console. You can probably guess, people, which one is not.
Oh yeah. Actually, I own all 4, and one of those isn't very good, but the other 3 are actually like really solid.
I'm missing the one that isn't good because I just haven't really been desired to get it. Maybe at some point, because we're going to have to talk about it at some point. But
you're not missing much.
Yeah, I've heard.
Ugh.
Yeah, we will be talking about all of those at some point, though.
Oh yeah. Some of those I'm actually really looking forward to talking about.
2 of them in particular are some of the biggest, best games on the system.
Weirdly enough, even that like soccer game, like I'm not a big soccer guy, but the bit of FIFA I played, I really enjoyed. I'm like, this is actually like very well done.
We'll have to do like a double header with FIFA and Madden, just because I don't think as much as like I'm not even a football like soccer guy at all, but like
I'm a football guy, not a soccer guy.
Like my favorite football game ever is NFL 2K5.
Oh, masterpiece.
Like that's the only game. That's the only football game I legit like because I've never been a football kid.
That's fair.
But I played a bit of Madden because I got it recently, and it's a good game. Like EA really tried.
Yeah, we'll do an EA Sports episode.
Yeah,
are those the only 2 EA Sports games?
PGA Tour as well.
Oh, okay. We'll throw all 3 in there. We'll make it a threesome.
Yeah, that'll work. All right, so I guess we said probably the mean for this one is probably not a high recommendation on Crash and Burn. It was definitely a product of its time. I mean, if you get it for cheap, though, I still say pick it up just because it's not the worst game on the system, but it's also not it's not what I consider like a masterpiece for the console as well.
If you can find it for like $5-10, go for it. But outside of that, personally, I would say no, because there are much better games on the 3DO that you could get in this genre.
Yes. That is a fact. All right. Well, I figure next time we come to talk about 3DO, we're going to be talking about some of the weird things about the 3DO console, because it is the definition of a non-standard console in pretty much every way, and there's a lot of fun things to talk about there. So I guess until next time, guys, we will see you later. You can find like all the 3DO experience links at Linktree/The Barber Who Games, and you can join the GNC Podcast Network Discord server where you can kind of join in on the conversation, see what's going on there. And
Please do.
Other than that, though, guys, we will see you all next time.
Bye-bye.
If you're not playing on a 3DO system, what are you playing with?